Hey guys, Dylan from the Geek Duo here, and today I'll be bringing you my breakdown and analysis of the second Percy Jackson Season 2 trailer that dropped 2 days before I started writing this script, because I didn't know it came out until that day. And hopefully this won't take me almost a month to put out like the last one did. Before we get started, I wanted to note that there are a lot of scenes in this trailer that expand upon what was shown in the first trailer. There doesn't seem to be very many new scenes being shown. There are a couple, but most of the shots in this trailer can be directly connected to scenes from the last one. So I won't be rehashing all the stuff that I broke down in that trailer in respective to those scenes. I'll just be breaking down the new context. So it might be best if you've watched my previous video before watching this one, so that you actually understand where I'm coming through with some of my assumptions. And obviously there's going to be major spoilers for the book and for what I believe the season will be, based on the similarities and the clear differences that they're going with. The trailer opens with Percy narrating to the audience, asking us if we get nightmares, before he goes on to explain that his dreams usually give him glimpses into the future. And as he's saying this, we get shots of 3 scenes that are most likely going to be dream sequences in this season. The first is guaranteed to be a dream, because it's the same one that we saw in the last trailer of Percy in the big house and Kronos barging his way in. The second is a shot of Percy standing in Camp Half-Blood next to the lake. The reason I say this is a dream is because of a shot that comes much later in the trailer, and I will elaborate upon it when we get to that scene. And the final one is the same shot of Grover running from a forest with this other group of people, at least one of whom we've been told is apparently loyal to Luke. They're running towards a beach. They see this massive tentacle come up between the boats they were clearly running towards, except now we see that the tentacle, it grabs Grover and drags him off. This is actually very similar to the opening dream sequence of the book, with Grover running from some unknown danger, heading towards somewhere that he thinks is going to be safe, only for a monster to appear and grab him and take him away somewhere. There is a notable lack of any wedding dresses in this scene. This could very well be the replacement of, hey, Grover's running from Luke's forces, and then all of a sudden he gets taken. The main reason I believe that the latter 2 shots are dreams is because of a thing that gets introduced in the Sea of Monsters called an empathy link. And this is a way for usually nature spirits like nymphs and satyrs and all of that to bond with one another, to be able to communicate through feelings and intense thoughts. Grover actually performs his connection on Percy while he's off on his searcher's mission. So they're able to feel each other's emotions, they're able to communicate across great distances and through dreams. Grover's a lot more in tune with this than Percy ever gets, because he's a nature spirit. Even still, the telepathy is not that good when they're awake. We do hear in the shot of Percy standing in Camp Half-Blood, we hear Grover's voice call out Percy's name. The second one, very similar to the opening dream in the book, and that was an empathy link dream. It also plays into the whole, everything we actually see about Grover in the book is entirely through Percy's empathy link dreams, because Grover is not present physically for the majority of the book, because he's out on his searcher's mission and then gets captured and taken away. Percy is the one who sees all the stuff and then relays it to the audience. Percy's narration then goes on to say that on top of his dreams showing him glimpses of the future, they also try to kill him. And this is more in line with what the dreams in the books are. Yeah, you do occasionally get the portent of doom, but that's usually just a threat from like the book's big bad or the overarching big bad. It's never really just a clean glimpse into the future unless you're like an oracle. Usually it's more of a sideways, sometimes backwards glimpse into what other people are doing. Like, as I said, most of this book is him seeing what Grover's doing. Sometimes he sees with Kronos in the first book. I can't really go into any others that aren't going to be spoilers for future books, but yeah, usually it's more of a sideways thing than a forward. As he's saying his dreams try to kill him, we see a shot of Percy in the forest wearing his Merryweather Prep uniform. So this is from the start of the season, and he's got a Laestrygonian giant who has his club raised above his head, ready to squash Percy. And then the scene cuts to Luke holding Backbiter in the exact same position. And this comes from the end of the season. So it's sort of bookending the season with similar events. And then Percy falls out of bed in his mortal bedroom, which is likely his response to the opening dream sequence with Grover, since that's actually his last day in the mortal world before heading to camp in the book. Percy reintroduces himself to the audience as he stares at his reflection before cutting to a taxi screeching to a halt in an intersection. We see Annabeth standing beside the same taxi with an open door behind her, meaning that she was in the taxi when it came to, and she asks Percy if he's been having the dreams. Percy, he thinks she's talking about his dream with Grover, and he's surprised that she has been having similar ones. But she's talking about her dreams about something bad happening in the camp. Now this interaction is basically one-to-one with one that happens in the book, when she saves him from Merryweather Prep and the Laestrygonian giants. What's interesting about this scene is that Annabeth seems to be using the Grey sisters to meet up with Percy. You can see all three of them in the front seat of the taxi, and you can see the Greek patterns along the trim of the taxi to show that this isn't just a normal New York one. That means that they're probably doing what they did in the first season and just skipping over most of the mortal world school stuff. You skip over all of the bullying, you skip over Annabeth trying to get Percy's attention all day while she's under her invisibility cap. You miss out on all the stuff with Percy's new bully, how Annabeth stands up to him, and all the funny interactions that happen at Merryweather Prep before and during the dodgeball game. Because as I said with season 1, they don't think the audience would find that part of it interesting for as long as it goes on in the book. This also builds upon my theory from the last trailer that they're actually merging the two big events from the first couple chapters in the book. That being the Laestrygonian attack at Merryweather Prep and the Colchis Bull attack on Camp Half-Blood. So they're taking the enemy from one and the location of the second and just merging them together. I did think they were going to, but also I would have loved to see the Colchis Bulls. It's actually one of the few things that actually was good about the second movie, the design of the Colchis Bulls. I can also understand them cutting it because those two are very similar events. Both giant monsters attacking a place they shouldn't be, very nigh indestructible, both have fire effects, both get taken out by Tyson using his Cyclops abilities, one fire resistance, one super strength. Very similar. So I can understand them merging it, especially if they're skipping over the school part. It then cuts to the same shot of the Camp Half-Blood chariot track in the aftermath of the Stymphalian bird attack that we saw in the first trailer. We then actually get to see the Stymphalian birds as they start dive bombing the audience, and the birds flying really reminds me of a shot from Jurassic Park. It's mainly the toothed beaks and the wing shapes reminding me of the pterodactyls. I will note that the beaks and talons do look more gold in this than the bronze that they're described in the book. The birds themselves are very clearly modeled after corvids, not pigeons. Finally, out of these chariot track shots, we see Annabeth's reaction to either the birds approaching or the aftermath of their attack. If it's the former, then for some reason they've got these three shots backwards in the trailer. Don't know why. And if it's the latter, well, that doesn't really make sense because when the birds start attacking, the race is still ongoing and Annabeth is driving the the Athena chariot, so she wouldn't be on the track itself to notice. There is actually a third thing that this could be in reference to, and that's her reacting to Percy re-arriving at the track after he's gone and stolen Chiron's boombox to play the greatest hits of Dean Martin to scare off the Stymphalian birds with the loud noise. We see that she's wearing a bronze helmet with a laurel wreath design, which was a symbol of victory that originated in ancient Greece, or at least as far as my research could find, it originated in ancient Greece and was put on the head of victors, so having that on her helmet. And you see on her chest plate, she actually has an Athenian owl. This is something that is interesting about the armor in this season, where each cabin seems to have its own different set. We see Athena has the owl, Poseidon has the hippocampus, which is the half horse, half fish that we see on Percy's. Later on in the trailer, we see a Hephaestus kid with crossed hammers. I don't know whether this is a neat piece of set design or this is purely to make it so the audience can tell who is who when they all have their helmets on in like a group shot. She's also standing next to the statue that I reasoned in the last trailer to be Demeter. The statue we see actually has an inscription on its base, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but it's spelled out Hepeth Katak. I couldn't find anything translating Hepeth from in Greek. Like, I translated it into Greek and to actually get the lettering to then translate into English. That didn't do anything. I googled the word as like an event, a monster, a person. I could not find anything. However, Katakt, that's obviously not the full word because it's clearly cut off there. It could be Katakt with an E, and that translates to conqueror, or Katakta, which is conquered. Or it could translate to something else and that word actually be a lot longer than I think. Just wanted to put what I was able to find out there. There's a repeat shot of Kronos entering the big house during Percy's dream that I mentioned earlier, before we get to the scene that matches the current narration, which is Mr. D in the big house saying that the camp is in more danger than Percy or Annabeth realize, while Tantalus is off to the side just watching the whole interaction. We immediately see what he means by this as it cuts to one of the Laestrygonians turning a wadded up ball of dirt into a flaming cannonball and throwing it at Percy, Annabeth and Tyson, only for it to get vaporized by arcs of electricity being generated by the camp barrier. I don't know whether the lightning is because the whole thing was created by Zeus, or because it's being powered by the tree that came of Thalia, who was a daughter of Zeus. I don't know, but this was never described as having any like offensive capabilities in the book. It was purely just basically a force field against monsters, so this is completely new territory. It would make sense for it being from Thalia, because that is the whole driving force of this book, is that the tree itself is dying, and so the barrier is dying. We get a shot of Percy, Annabeth and Tyson sitting in the back of the Grey Sisters taxi as Percy asks them about Grover, and there's a quick shot to actually remind the audience who Grover is, in case they've forgotten. Before one of the sisters, I don't know if it's Wasp, Tempest or Anger, I can't remember who's meant to be in what seat, they say that the three of them, they see all, which prompts Tyson to comment on, hey, they only have one eye between the three of them. And so they throw that back at him for having only one eye, which does confirm Percy finds out about Tyson being a Cyclops way earlier in the season than he does in the book. In the book, it's after the Colchis Bull attack, because Annabeth has had to have given him permission to cross over the barrier because he's a monster, and Percy's like, what do you mean you had to give him permission? And Annabeth is like, hey, focus on his face. I know the mist is making it you want to avert your eyes and everything, but push past that feeling and look at him. And Percy sees, oh, he's only got one eye. Whereas in here, obviously, before they've even left Manhattan, he knows that Tyson's a Cyclops. And I really thought that in the last trailer, that hero shot of Tyson jumping in front of the cannonball was going to be the reveal. But that happens after this, though. The sisters then speed the taxi off, using a drachma as the fare currency, and they seemingly warp the world around them as the buildings of Manhattan begin stretching and distorting as the windows are engulfed in smoke. And in the next shot, we see the taxi emerging from a cloud of smoke that is small enough that we should have been able to see the taxi behind it before it broke through. So seemingly they're traveling through some sort of like pocket dimension, linking places in a way that the mortal world doesn't, which we do actually know of a couple things in the Percy Jackson universe that can do that kind of thing. So it's not out of there for the sisters to be able to do it too, especially considering in the book they're described as rising from the asphalt as a full taxi. So Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson run out of the woods surrounding Half-Blood Hill after their encounter with the Laestrygonians, and they see Luke standing under Thalia's tree with his sword stabbed into the trunk. He then tells Percy that he'll see him out there, meaning the real world, before flying away on a black Pegasus. This is a major change from the book. As I mentioned in the last trailer, there were no witnesses to Luke poisoning the tree. There was no evidence linking him, which is why Chiron gets fired, because they believe that either he did it because he's the son of Kronos, or that he was not doing his job properly and let enemy forces get close enough to weaken what is supposed to be the only safe place for demigods. He gets fired in the books because no one knows how it happens, yet there are witnesses here. And I did point out in the last trailer that it looked like Luke looked up at something as he was pulling his sword out. So I was correct in clocking that. I don't know what this is going to mean for things though. Percy explains that if Thalia's tree falls, then the whole barrier will be destroyed. And he's saying this in the big house while still in his school uniform. So this is probably right before Dionysus says that the camp's in more trouble than he thought. This is followed by a shot of the Laestrygonians pounding against the barrier to reinforce the danger. But if you actually look at the background of this shot, this is a completely different day. This is the same sky as we see in Luke's attack, which I've said is at the end of the season. The reason that it's showing this shot of the Laestrygonians is because they are furiously pounding on the barrier and suffering almost no repercussions except being physically stopped. And then in the following shot, you see Tyson just try and walk through it and get blasted backwards by lightning. So it shows just how much of a difference the full strength barrier and this weakened one is. The majority of the rest of the trailer is a bunch of very quick shots that jump through a lot of different places, but all you can really see is the location and the actors. So I'm just going to rapid fire go through these, and if any of them need like extra explanation, I'll just explain them as we get to them. We see a shot of Percy and Annabeth's demigod senses alerting them to the Laestrygonians charging through the forest. A shot of Luke's army charging towards Camp Half-Blood. Note the sky is the same as the Laestrygonian one a couple scenes back. A shot of Percy below the decks of the CSS Birmingham saying that they need to save Grover. Percy in his bedroom touching a travel photo that Grover sent him. Grover bound and gagged in Polyphemus's cave, which again we see no wedding dress, which means the whole him pretending to be a bride, pulling the whole Penelope bridal vow thing where he's unthreading all the work every night. That's not going to be a thing. That was yet another thing that made this book pretty much the exact same as the Odyssey. A shot of Polyphemus standing in his field. We get 3 shots of Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson running from the Laestrygonians' fireballs, and in each of these shots, a different one almost gets hit by him, starting with this is arcing towards Annabeth, Percy gets blown off his feet, and then Tyson almost gets hit. Tantalus issuing the quest to save the camp, Clarice raiding an armory on what looks to be the Princess Andromeda. This does actually get confirmed later on. Percy with Riptide drawn in preparations to fight the Laestrygonians. You can tell because he's in the same forest and his school uniform. Tyson in the burning boiler room of the CSS Birmingham before the whole ship explodes. Clarice and Annabeth preparing to battle beside the Princess Andromeda pool deck. And you can see Clarice is holding the exact same weapons that she just grabbed from the armory, so that's what I mean by it was confirmed. Tantalus pointing out the Sea of Monsters as being the Bermuda Triangle, and Percy reacting to something in the big house while not wearing his school uniform. This is actually the same outfit that he wears when going on the quest, so I think this may be him reacting to Tantalus giving it to Clarice. The next chunk is entirely focused on the CSS Birmingham. We have it sailing through the fog of the Sea of Monsters, Clarice at the wheel taking charge, the undead soldiers reacting to something, Percy jumping off one of the turrets and running along the deck. This is at a different point to the previous shots. The same shot of Annabeth and Percy reacting to something while on the deck that was in the last trailer. And then it turns out that I was correct in what it was they were reacting to, because we see one of Scylla's heads plucking the sailor off the deck and carrying it up to her cave. We have Percy looking pissed, probably in reaction to losing some of the soldiers loading the turret, which is related to a different scene later on. Same with Clarice screaming while firing said turret. Percy's eyes seemingly glowing, so I think this may be him channeling his powers, and the CSS Birmingham being tossed around by waves as something is glowing underwater nearby. And I think this gets explained later on as well. We have someone wielding the Aegis shield, which is traditionally Athena's shield, which was given to her by Zeus, and she mounted the head of Medusa on it after Perseus chopped it off. There are two people it could be. There are two known Aegis wielders in the story, both of whom use the shield, and both of whom would more than likely be played by dark-skinned actors. The first is Athena, being Annabeth's mum. Either she's the same ethnicity or Frederick is. We don't actually know which one is which. Could be both for all we know. So this could be Athena, or this could be Thalia. Now, apparently she has been cast. I don't know who she's been cast by, so I don't know if this is her or not, but that is most definitely not a 12-year-old girl. And it's important, she needs to be a 12-year-old girl, because that's the age she was when she arrived at camp and died and got turned into a tree. Either they're doing some weird age things and having her die right before she could be a child of the prophecy, or they're bringing in Athena early. I don't know. I also can't tell who the people that she's squaring up against is. We have Annabeth on a sailboat heading towards an island. This little sailboat thing, I don't know. Unless they're changing this out for the pirate ship, I don't know. We have these weird rock creatures who are covered in like sea stuff, like starfish, seaweed, stuff like that. And they're scaring Annabeth. I don't know what these are either. They could be the sirens, because they're the only monster from the actual Sea of Monsters that we've yet to see. This is vastly different from the overly fishy mermaids that you usually see sirens depicted as. It's also very different from the actual bird women that Demeter turned the original sirens from humans into to search for Persephone. I don't know whether these are the sirens or this is something else. We're back at camp and Percy is in the camp war council room, which I should note has a notable lack of ping pong tables used as a meeting table. And he's encouraging who I assume to be the other cabin heads. We have a repeat shot of Percy ready to fight with one of Clarice's Vikings behind him. We have our first look at Circe and her bar attendants, and then we have her having turned Percy into a guinea pig. Surprised that's in the trailer. And then again, most people who don't know the book wouldn't know that's Cersei and wouldn't know that she's moved on from pigs to guinea pigs. We have a shot that's not in the book, which is Ares and Clarisse, and this is probably when he's giving her the CSS Birmingham. Now, this actually does seem to be a very different relationship from how it was in the book, because Ares berates Clarisse through a projection that Percy overhears, where he's basically saying, it was a mistake for you to have this quest. You should have gone to any of your brothers. They are all more deserving than you. Because Ares in the book, not a good person. Ares in the show, seemingly better, I guess. It seems to actually be on good terms with his daughter. Don't know. Again, we'll just have to wait and see if the projection scene shows up, because that's actually another bonding scene between Percy and Clarisse. They both have abusive father figures, and that sort of brings them a bit closer, brings them a big step closer to not quite friends, but friendly rivals. Everything that builds towards Clarisse and Percy's friendship seems to be gone. We'll just have to wait to see what happens between the actual scenes that they share together, as to whether they build it up a different way, they make it more slow burn, I don't know. Because that is a very important part of the start of book 5, is their mutual friendship. We have a door exploding in the crew area of the Princess Andromeda, which means I was correct again about where this location is. And we seemingly visit it twice, because after we see this shot of the coffin that Kronos is using to rejuvenate his body, each demigod that joins Luke's side, that turns against the god in service of Kronos, a new piece of his body gets brought up from Tartarus and stored in this coffin. After we have this, and him saying to kill Percy, and Luke looking pissed, which is, if you notice the lighting, a different day, so this is probably on their second time on the Princess. We see Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson running through that exploded door, but we also see Percy, he's not holding the Golden Fleece, yet in the other trailer, when we saw him running through this area, he did have the Golden Fleece. Also, to reinforce the difference, is there's a shot of Percy holding the Golden Fleece running through the actual corridors of the Princess where all the staterooms are. We get a few shots of the camp chariot race, including Percy and Tyson in the Poseidon chariot, the Athena chariot rounding the corner, Tyson using his trident to knock another camper out of their chariot, which, based off of the spikes, the black horses, and me thinking that that is Clarisse's hair, this is probably the Ares chariot, and he's basically left them defenseless, because the whole reason there's two people in the chariot is one person's driving, the other person is warding off attacks in that. We see Luke ordering his troops forward during his attack on Camp Half-Blood, and Percy and the other campers charging to meet them. Percy and Luke fighting each other while the two armies clash around them, and this guy in bronze, he's the one I mentioned earlier as having the crossed hammers on his armor, making him a Hephaestus cabin. And my money's on this actually being Beckendorf, who is an important character. It's good for them to at least set him up this early. Percy blocking one of Luke's sword strikes, showing how much he's improved in his sword fighting, because Luke was number 1, and then now Percy is able to at least somewhat defend himself against him, but can't defend against him grabbing Percy's collar and punching him in the nose. I was right in saying that Luke breaks Percy's nose. I said that in the last trailer. He gets punched, falls down, and then the next shot is him falling to his knees and passing out in a completely different shot. The whole enemy army is not visible here. We do see one camper who is most likely dead, a couple others in the background, and Clarisse, who isn't wearing her camp shirt, nor is she wearing any armor. So did she not participate in this battle? Seems very weird for the head counselor of the Ares cabin to not participate in the battle protecting Camp Half-Blood, especially when, in the book, Clarisse is the only person who stands up to Tantalus and says, no, because the barrier is weakening, we need these patrol missions around the boundary to make sure no monsters get in. That's something that her and Percy agree on at the very start of the book, before the quest or anything. Even after the Cultist Bull attack, when she starts berating Percy for distracting her and getting her hit in battle, he's like, hey, before we get into this, let's tend to the wounded first. And Clarissa's demeanor just turns like that, and she's suddenly in, I need to look after my troops because I am a leader. So for her to not participate in the battle is very interesting. Now, to be fair, she might not even be at camp when the battle happens. Like, she could be off guarding the fleece. That could be the whole thing. Like I mentioned in the last trailer, that this book ends with Percy, Annabeth, and Grover sending Clarisse on ahead to camp with the Golden Fleece before Luke's army catches up with them and takes them onto the Andromeda the second time. So the Fleece and Clarisse never go on the ship. Yet we've seen both of them in this trailer. So it could be that when they're on the ship trying to escape, Percy sends Clarisse and the Black Pegasus, who I'm going to say is Blackjack, off to get away from the ship, get the Fleece away from Kronos, and she could just be arriving at camp at the end of the battle. Like, maybe she's put the Fleece on the tree and it's repelled Kronos' forces. That could very well be it. We'll just have to wait and see. We have Hermes telling someone that they can't give up on family. Now, this is either an unseen scene of him and Luke, or this is from when he's asking Percy to try and save Luke at the start of the book. We have Percy hugging Sally in the forest near camp, and I don't really know when this is because he leaves for camp suddenly. Also, he's not in his uniform. They sneak out to go on the quest, so it wouldn't really be her hugging him goodbye for the quest. They seemingly have the battle with Luke almost immediately upon arriving back. So unless this is at the very end of the season, I don't know when this is going to be. And finally, we have the shot that brings us all the way back to the start of the trailer, where I was talking about scenes that are probably going to be dreams, in Percy standing by the lake at Camp Half-Blood, and he turns around and sees Poseidon, who then comforts him and says that he should not underestimate himself. The reason I say this is a dream is because Poseidon only actually shows up at camp once, and he's fishing out a sea serpent from the lake. There's not this interaction, and most of the time when gods communicate with their kids in the books across most of the series, it's through their dreams, because they're not supposed to communicate directly because of the whole not supposed to show favoritism for their kids, meant to stay distant from all of them, but they do reach out to their kids, usually through their dreams, because those are less monitored. That's why I think this is a dream. The final part of the trailer is a mostly connected sequence of Percy taking over as the CSS Birmingham is struggling to make it through Charybdis's whirlpool. We see its tooth-like spikes rising from the waters in the background, not to be confused with actual teeth. These are just jagged rock. As Percy pushes his way past fleeing soldiers, we also see a couple up on the roof who fall off, and he's making his way to the front of the ship while Clarisse is madly firing the turret. This brings us back to the scenes earlier that I mentioned would connect later. She's firing towards what appears to be Charybdis's main body, and if you notice the water, that's glowing the same blue that we saw near the ship way back. I'm guessing it's Charybdis emerging that was the glowing blue earlier. Percy braces himself against the splashing water as he tries to concentrate on his powers, and the next thing we see is what appears to be a hurricane localized entirely around the CSS Birmingham, as it and the waters raise the ship up high enough to pass over Charybdis's spikes. This is interesting because Percy's not meant to get his hurricane generation powers until a certain event in the Battle of the Labyrinth happens. And it's actually debated as to whether that is the cause of it, or the thing near the start of The Last Olympian is the cause of it. So I'm just going to chalk this up to, they're in a magical place. There's already a storm raging, magic waters, magic storm, amplifying Percy's powers to be able to create this hurricane, and he's not going to be able to do it himself till a few years later. Anyway, that's everything that I was able to notice in the second trailer. Like I said, there weren't many completely new scenes that were shown, because most of these things can be directly connected to ones in the first trailer, and there wasn't really much I could do in terms of breaking it down, because either I've already done that in the previous trailer, or the shots just showed a setting and a person. So there wasn't really much to break down. Considering that we have less than a month now until the first episode drops, I don't think we're going to be getting a third trailer. So I guess this will be everything that I can break down until the show starts. So with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.